Hey guys, this weekend was such a great weekend at CCV where we talked about our missions program, and for me, I can never get enough of that. So I've asked my best friend, Larry Fraley, who's our missions pastor, been here since the beginning of the church. I've asked him to carve out some time to continue the discussion. You guys are going to get the behind the scenes extra material of missions at CCV, and then you're going to answer these specific questions. So I'm going to give you the questions up front. We're going to have an interview, and then you get to talk around your circle of how you can be involved in the missions at CCV. Here's the first question. If you bid on a mission trip, what was that like? Share your experience. Question 2, what did you learn this weekend or in this interview that you did not know about CCV missions? Number 3, what did you find most inspiring about our mission story at CCV? And what are you going to do about it? So I want to just welcome to the studio Larry Fraley. He's a missions pastor at CCV. Been here really from the very first meeting in the living room with Don Wilson, right?
That's right. Yeah.
You know, a lot of people look to me and Ashley like we get more FaceTime, but I just want to tell you there are people on our staff that are like their abilities, their skills, their talent, their work is so over the top amazing, and this guy here is one of those. He's one of our secret ninja warriors on our campus. So I want to ask you, Larry, you're leading the charge with mission. How has COVID changed business as usual for missions?
Well, COVID has changed missions dramatically. I mean, it has completely changed our programming. It's not just CCV. It has changed missions across the country. So obviously trips are a big part of most missions departments, most missions ministries inside the church, and that all came to a complete halt.
Like done.
So
not permanently though.
No, it's coming back, but it has taken us 2 years to get back to where we were probably 8 years ago, maybe.
Wow.
And so when we started, when COVID hit, missions was busier than any other department well, that's not true. The media department became the most valuable group of people in the church because we went online.
Yeah.
Now, missions also went into action because we were now working in the community. I mean, 10, 12 hours a day, working with the homeless, setting up COVID testing sites, doing childcare, all of that stuff. We were busy.
Now, CCV actually, this is one of your brainchilds, is got masks even to many of our medical personnel who couldn't get them otherwise.
Well, it through our global outreach and network, really, we were able to get a hold of masks inside of China that not a lot of people could get.
Wow, that's amazing. So, but what happened, after the initial COVID shock, we start regathering. What happened to missions then? Because there's no trips.
Right, it was a flip-flop. So we were working while everyone was home, and then we all came back. All of a sudden, trips stopped, and we stopped all of our outreach downtown and around the valley, and so we were sitting there with not a lot to do.
And I know that had a serious emotional impact on you personally.
It did. For about a little over a year, I went into some significant, I'd almost say depression, because I could not find the purpose for missions at CCV. And I wasn't alone. That was happening all over the country. And so during that period of time, I spent a lot of time in prayer. I spent a lot of time seeking godly counsel like you, and trying to read scripture, trying to figure out what was the next step for mission at CCV.
A lot of people, when they get depression, it paralyzes them. But for you, it was kind of energizing, like your Enneagram 5 kicked in and you started thinking, like, what are we going to do with missions? What's the theology? I think the theology of missions today at CCV is healthier than it's ever been. I'd love to hear you talk through that just a little bit.
Well, I went through that period, that time in the desert, so to speak, and I began to realize that we're not doing perhaps missions. Perhaps I've not been obedient. And
wow.
That's what I discovered, and that really worried me. And I realized there was this terminology problem that we have, and we still have it today. We've pretty much not been able to define what missions really is anymore. Missions means so much.
Right.
It is almost like an ink blot you put in front of someone, and they just, because of their presuppositions, because of the way they grew up, missions no longer means the same. And the problem is that we began putting everything into missions to where if you put everything into missions, then there's nothing missions.
Yeah, and they're good things. So we're talking about social justice, feeding the homeless. Those are good things. So how would you, as the missions pastor at CCV, how would you differentiate between missions as making disciples and missions as social justice? Both are good. One is better.
Right. Well, for my definition and what I came to understand is that missions has nothing to do with social justice. All of us are on mission. All of us are called to join the mission of God. Missions becomes a subset, and missions is defined as someone called to go into a particular part of the world or into a particular setting for a particular purpose, leaving their job and all of that to go. Usually that's in a cross-cultural setting. Mission can be done, like I said, by all of us. And so the mission of the church is to do justice, but it's also to proclaim the Christ to the world. And that's where we're confused, because we want to put these justice things into missions. When we do that, we shift our focus away from the rest of the world.
And you're not saying to cut out like fighting human trafficking or foster care. You're not saying to cut that out. You're saying if we don't plant more churches and make Christ known in new areas, social justice in those areas really doesn't have an eternal difference.
No, it doesn't. And in fact, it comes down to two things. When Jesus came and walked around on earth before the crucifixion, obviously he was doing justice things. He was healing the sick. He was feeding the poor. Once he was crucified, we see places in Scripture in Matthew and Mark and Luke and then in Acts 1:1 where he's very specific. These are the last words that Jesus gave. Commandments to go, baptize, proclaim the gospel to the ends of the earth. And so making disciples. So there is this demonstration and this proclamation that make up what Jesus has commanded us to do.
Yeah, and just for those of you watching, your group coach right now, in the handout that we provided, has all 5 of the major Great Commission statements. And you could do exactly what Larry did in his desert wandering. Go through those statements and just ask, what does it mean to make disciples? And that will help you see why Larry was so infused or energized to shift a little bit of our focus more on the proclamation of the gospel beyond mere social justice.
That's right.
So if I were to ask you, because it sounds a bit like a Debbie Downer, like Larry went through a tough time and we weren't doing missions exactly right. If I were to ask you to give us the state of world missions right now, what would you say?
Well, the state of world missions right now is undergoing this transformation, I believe, as churches today begin to realize that we have put more and more time and more of our focus into doing justice and local missions work. I mentioned earlier, there is this demonstration and this proclamation that we fight with. Both of them are equally important.
I want you to say that again, because that just clicked with me. Demonstration, proclamation. The demonstration is feeding the poor, helping the homeless. The proclamation is the good news of Jesus Christ, the eternal saving gospel. Both are important.
Yes.
I love that demonstration, proclamation.
Well, we've all seen the demonstration of the 2 rocks. So imagine you've got 2 rocks here, demonstration, proclamation, they're big rocks. And we have all the stuff that we do involved in justice and the demonstration of our acts. Those are all small things compared to the big rock. Imagine filling a jar up with a bunch of sand. Those are all of our demonstration acts, and then we try to put both rocks in on top of it. It doesn't fit.
Yeah.
You have to put both rocks in first and pour everything in around it, because we'll lose sight of the proclamation. We'll lose sight that there's over 3 billion people who are unreached today.
Out of how many in the world? 3 billion
almost
out of
8 billion. We're like 7.7 billion. 3 billion of those are unreached, meaning that there's less than 2% Christians in that people group. Now, out of that 3 billion, there's almost 1 billion who are unengaged. That means there are no access to any kind of person that knows Christ, any kind of scripture. If you went into an unengaged people group and mentioned the word Jesus, they would look at you like, who is that?
So 1 billion, if we took the population of Phoenix and multiplied it by 200, that's the number of people in our world that don't have a chance to hear about Jesus.
That's right. And so that's why we need...
Well, that's not right.
Well,
but that is
you
true.
are correct, but that's why we need the S on missions to make sure that we separate from the demonstration and the proclamation to the rest of the world. Now, we're all called to proclaim Christ even in our community. Mm-hmm. But to know that there's over 3 billion people somewhere that does not know Christ, those are the low-hanging fruit of our world. And that's the part that we're going to seriously address in the coming years at CCV.
And as I understand it, we have 3 big rock initiatives under missions. Talk about those. Unpack each of those for what CCV is going to be doing going forward through missions.
Yeah, well, the first initiative is to begin to shift more focus, more resources to the unreached and unengaged people groups. That's group number 1.
On board.
Number 2 is a rethinking of our mission trips. So we have done, obviously, a lot of different mission trips where we get a team together, we'll go over to some of our mission partners and we'll serve that mission partner and work with them, learn from them. Because disciple making is such an important commandment.
It's foundational.
That there are many movements happening across the world today where there are hundreds of thousands of people coming to Christ through movements that's happening through successful disciple-making movements.
Hundreds of thousands.
Hundreds of thousands. And we have data to back that out. God is on the move like no other time in history.
The Apostle Paul would be jealous of you right now, wouldn't he?
You know, we live, and Ashley brought it up 2 or 3 weeks ago in a service, we actually live in a time like no other time in history. God is scattering Christians around the world like no other time in history.
Wow.
He's gathering Christians like no other time. Right now, in China, there is a train that leaves from Beijing to Germany. On that train, there's around 2,000 Chinese. They get off at the other end. That train turns around in about 3 hours, and only a few hundred get back on. Now, not all of those Chinese are Christian, but there are many who are Christian. Christianity is being spread throughout Germany. The face of Germany is changing to be Chinese. Now, it's not just Germany. There are people leaving by the thousands from Africa. Why? They want a better life. The center of Christianity right now is in Africa. 700 million Christians. There are databases and studies that have asked the question, what does the average Christian look like in the world?
This is stunning. Listen carefully.
Yeah, pouring through all of the data, identifying all the people groups and Christianity throughout the world, out popped this profile of the most profiled Christian in the world. It was a 46-year-old black woman.
Wow.
Now, those 700 million Christians in Africa, many of them want a better life. Just like the Christians in Jerusalem who left after they were being persecuted, they wanted a better life. Yeah. So do these people. Now, they're spreading throughout the world. Many of them's coming to the U.S., many of them's going into Europe. South America, as we all know, is coming in. The United States today is the most global, diversified country in the world. There is no other country that can even hold a candle to the diverse people that lives in the United States. That presents a challenge. Yeah. It presents a challenge for the church.
And an opportunity.
How is the church going to integrate all of these people that's coming?
Do you guys see why he's my best friend? I mean, this is unbelievable. I could go on for hours and hours. In fact, I get to go on for hours and hours with Larry, but we can't do this forever. I'm going to do just lightning round questions, quick answers. If you need to get to your group discussion, go ahead and push pause right now. But here's a lightning round. Larry does not know this is coming. What percentage of CCV's budget goes to missions?
10%.
Which turns into how many dollars this year?
This year, it's projected to be $9 million.
So this year, CCV is going to have approximately 2,500 baptisms and change. If you looked at just our mission partners that we're responsible for, how many baptisms are they going to have?
Well, I haven't added up, and nor have I collected the data from all 64.
So we have 64 mission partners. Okay.
But I have collected the data for about half a dozen. And so I believe, if my memory serves me right, the number of baptisms that those 6 mission partners are somewhere close to 10,000. Now, we're not directly responsible for all 10,000, but we are the largest church supporter
of those
mission partners.
If you disappear tomorrow, where should I go try to find you?
Try to find me somewhere in the Middle East or somewhere in Asia. Now, if I go, I probably won't want to be found.
What are the 3 mission partners that get you most excited right now?
Team Expansion is one. Missions of Hope in Kenya. And I would say Good News Productions with Mike Schrage.
If someone was to want to go on a mission trip right now, what's their first step?
Check our website. We have posted probably 24 trips here just recently, with plans to produce more. And I am right in the middle, which gets back to the third item that you talked about earlier, of putting together a group of men that I can take into a successful disciple-making movement to learn how to make disciples in a third world culture.
That's amazing. Larry, thanks for carving out some time for us. And thank you for devoting your life, mostly behind the scenes, to making disciples. Enjoy your discussion.